Genesis 1:5, a reflection on God's promises, faith, and trust. Genesis 15 is a beautiful and pivotal chapter that reminds us of the faithfulness of God, the depth of His promises, and the importance of trusting Him, even when circumstances seem uncertain. It is a chapter filled with hope, reassurance, and lessons for our own walk of faith. The chapter begins with God speaking directly to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." These words remind us that God's presence is our ultimate source of security and provision. Even when life feels uncertain, His protection and blessings are sufficient for every need. Abram, however, expresses a deep concern. Despite God's earlier promise to make him a great nation, Abram remains childless. He asks God, "What can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus." Abram's honesty in this moment teaches us a vital lesson. We can come to God with our doubts, fears, and questions. He is a loving Father who listens to the cries of our hearts. In response, God reassures Abram with an incredible promise. He takes Abram outside and says, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be." This breathtaking moment highlights God's ability to do the impossible. Even when we cannot see how His promises will unfold, He remains faithful to fulfill them in His perfect timing. The chapter goes on to record a profound statement of faith. Abram believed the Lord, and He credited it to him as righteousness. This verse underscores the centrality of faith in our relationship with God. It is not by our works or efforts that we are made right with Him, but by believing in His promises and trusting in His character. Abram's faith is an example for all believers, reminding us to rest in God's promises, even when the path ahead seems unclear. God then reiterates His promise to give Abram and his descendants the land of Canaan. To further assure Abram, God establishes a covenant with him through a solemn ceremony. Abram prepares a series of animals as God instructs, and as night falls, a deep sleep comes over him. In the darkness, Abram sees a smoking firepot and a blazing torch pass between the pieces of the animals. This powerful image represents God Himself, binding His covenant with Abram in an unconditional and eternal promise. The significance of this covenant cannot be overstated. It reveals God's commitment to His people and His willingness to carry the weight of the promise entirely on Himself. This moment foreshadows the ultimate covenant fulfilled through Jesus Christ, who bore our sins and secured our salvation through His sacrifice on the cross. Genesis 15 offers us several life lessons to reflect on. God is our shield and reward in a world full of uncertainties. We are reminded that God's presence and protection are more valuable than anything else we could seek. When we place our trust in Him, He provides security and peace. It's okay to bring our doubts to God. Abram's questions show us that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to bring those doubts before God and trust Him to provide the answers. Faith is the foundation of righteousness. Abram's belief in God's promises was credited to him as righteousness. Similarly, our faith in Jesus Christ makes us right with God and secures our place in His family. God's promises are sure, even when the path is unclear. Just as Abram could not see how he would become the father of many nations, we may not always understand how God's plans will unfold in our lives, but His word is unchanging, and His timing is always perfect. God takes the weight of His promises upon Himself. The covenant ceremony shows us that God's faithfulness does not depend on our strength, but on His unchanging character. This truth should fill us with hope and confidence, knowing that His promises are eternal. As you reflect on Genesis 15, may you be inspired to trust God more deeply. He is faithful to keep His word, and His plans for your life are far greater than anything you could imagine. Let this chapter encourage you to walk by faith, to rest in His promises, and to bring your questions and fears before Him. His love is steadfast, and His covenant is unbreakable.